A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, checking in today with a organisation with Christianity at its core that feeds more than 2.6 million children every school day in 16 of the world's poorest developing countries. Lachlan Mitchell is the National Manager of Mary's Meals Australia. Lachlan, a special welcome along to 2020.
Great to be with you, Neil.
Hey, Lachlan, just reflect for a few moments on the founding of Mary's Meals, because the influence is so widespread here. Where does it go back to?
Yeah, above all, Mary's Meals is a fruit of prayer. It's many little acts of love of people around the world that creates a big impact. So Mary's Meals was founded in 2002 by a Scotsman called Magnus, and he'd had a powerful conversion experience as a teenager. And he was on a trip to Malawi during a terrible famine there where people were actually eating the roots of trees in order to survive. And Magnus met a 14-year-old boy called Edward, whose mother, Emma, was dying of AIDS. And his father had already died. And in an attempt to lighten the mood, Magnus asked the young boy, Edward, "What are your hopes and dreams in life?" Edward said that his dream was to have enough food to eat and one day to go to school. So Mary's Meals was born. We began feeding 200 children. And now more than 20 years later, as you said, every school day, we have the joy of being able to feed more than 2.6 million children in 16 of the world's poorest developing countries.
So if we're naming those countries, maybe the prominent ones where you're hard at work, is it Africa and Asia? Which other countries around the world? You said there's 16 of these countries.
Yeah, so we're all through Africa. Our biggest program is in Malawi, where every school day we feed more than 1 million children, which is almost equivalent to a third of the primary school-aged population in Malawi. But we also in a number of countries in Africa and India. We're in also places like in the Middle East, in Syria and Lebanon and Yemen, as well as in Haiti and in Ecuador. So we have a big vision, and I love the name of your radio station, Vision, because our vision is that every school day we'd be able to feed every child a meal that needs it across the world.
And Lachlan, you started with Mary's Meals as a volunteer, and you are now at the helm of the Australian arm. I imagine there are various other offices around the world that all are interacting, but your own story in here, that's pretty significant too, just volunteering at the beginning.
Neil, actually, when I was a teenager, I had the opportunity to visit a number of countries in Asia, and I was marked by the poverty that I encountered there. It was a stark contrast to my life in Australia, where I was ordering a hamburger from my local takeaway after a short flight home, and a dream was sown in my heart of a future where there was no poverty, where there was no hunger. And then I met the Mary's Meals movement, who shared my vision, who shared my dream. And when I found out that it only cost $34.80 Australian to feed a child for a whole school year, with 93 cents in every dollar raised going straight to our programs, I just thought that it was such an amazing ministry that could reach so many people, even for a small gift. That's equivalent to my weekly coffee budget to be able to feed a child for a whole school year. So I knew that I wanted to share this good story in Australia.
Lachlan, familiar with some organisations that do similar sorts of things, feeding children and getting them an education too. Sometimes it's access to the food and getting the food to the children, and then having a volunteer base to be able to cook the food and feed the children. How does your model work like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Neil. Our model is locally owned, and community driven. So we raise awareness and funds for our work here in the West at schools and churches and in local communities. Then we buy the food from local farmers wherever possible, homegrown in our program countries to support the local economy. And then it's delivered to the schools where we partner with a volunteer army of mums and dads in the hundreds of thousands that stir the porridge pots for their kids and cook the rice and beans. And then we do it all again tomorrow. So I love that it's the mums and dads that are at the heart of our model, and it's dignifying that they still have the opportunity to provide a meal for their children.
And of course, the organisation known as Mary's Meals, and you might be led to be thinking, oh, Mary's Meals, that sounds a little bit Catholic. But you're actually quite ecumenical. It's like a non-denominational movement. How do you describe the movement?
That's it now. We're an ecumenical sort of movement of the whole human family, we think. It's a universal mission, so we have benefactors and beneficiaries of all faiths and none. At the same time, we are really driven by people's generosity as they pray for our work. For me, Mary's Meals is a very supernatural story because that it's scaled and grown so much whilst only spending 7% on fundraising. So I knew that God was behind it, that the Holy Spirit loved this movement. And that's how we've been able to grow all the different denominations that support us. We're really one big family that's diverse, but with a simple mission, which is to feed children at school.
And Lachlan, it's mind-boggling, isn't it, to consider that there are millions upon millions of children who would go hungry if it were not for organisations like yours. How do you describe the extent of hunger there is around the world, given that the organisation you're working with is in 16 nations?
Yes. Well, actually, we see our work as just beginning because every school day, there are 67 million children that are out of school because of hunger in the world's poorest countries. There's almost an equivalent amount that are in school but are too hungry to learn because they don't have the food to give them the energy to be able to concentrate at school. So in theory, there's around 120 million kids that are in need of Mary's Meals. So that's why we think that there's such room to grow, here by bringing on more partners in Australia that would just give of the widow's mite, a small amount, a large amount, a medium amount, to be able to help to grow our work. So I love that there's a place for everyone in Mary's Meals, whether it's giving of your time, your talent, your treasure, that you can be part of our family.
And of course, so many of us want to do something that helps to address poverty in nations, developing nations, and high levels of poverty. But you can't address poverty unless you really first deal with the major elephant in the room. When children are hungry, you've got to be able to address hunger, haven't you?
And we find that whenever we begin feeding in a new school, the enrollments dramatically increase because parents want to send their children to schools where they know they'll be fed, so then they can concentrate at school. And maybe I could just share one testimony, Neil, of one of the children that's ate Mary's Meals, and it's a testimony of Lydia from Ethiopia, and she ran up to our team wanting to be interviewed, and she said that before Mary's Meals began feeding in her school community, many of the children were hungry and didn't come to school, but now, because of the promise of the meal, they can concentrate in class and help to create a better future for their country. And Lydia said that her dream was to be an aeroplane pilot because she saw the birds in the sky that looked so free. And when I heard that story, it really touched me because without Mary's Meals, those dreams and aspirations that Lydia has may never be possible. So the need is urgent. And also there's a great joy in giving. We're aware that the need is so great, but this is a work that we do with a smile and with great hope because that we know the joy that Mary's Meals can bring to communities.
And you mentioned the figure there, $34.80 to feed a child for a whole school year. That just sounds almost too good to be true, but that's the reality of how things happen in the developing world, isn't it? When people are working basically for survival wages and producing that food to be able to feed those children. You've got a motto, school plus food equals hope. Describe how that motto is so important.
Is at the heart of Mary's Meals. We never want to be despairing about this work. Rather, we want to concentrate on the joy, the hope, the life that eating a simple meal at school can bring to these local communities. And we know because that we combine food and education together, that the children have the hope to be able to dream of a better future. And we believe not only do children have the right to food and to education, but a right to hope.
For listeners to connect with Lachlan Mitchell, and Lachlan is the National Manager of Mary's Meals Australia, marysmeals.org.au, marysmeals.org.au, and I imagine that people are able to support one child and multiple children and perhaps whole classrooms of children, $34.80 to feed a child for a whole school year. That website, once again, marysmeals.org.au, working in 16 nations around the world, and went from feeding just 200 children in Malawi to now more than 2.6 million children every school day with a meal at their place of education in those 16 nations. Lachlan Mitchell, thanks so much for your insights today on 2020.
Thanks, Neil. God bless.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.